All right, we'll be starting in just a couple minutes. If you guys want to go ahead and start, we have some questions that people had sent in advance. If you guys want to, in the comments field, go ahead and ask some more questions and topics that you want covered. We'll make sure that we'll get through as many as we can tonight. We'll go for about 2 hours. For those watching afterwards, online on YouTube, we'll have this available that you could watch online, but we'll kind of let people get logged in and get started with that. All right, we'll be starting in just a couple minutes. If you guys want to go ahead. All right, so you see some more questions coming in. All right, that's good. All right, so we got the question from Kurt55 about doing the repeats function and staccato dots. So I got that earlier. Okay, and I see Maurice's questions about patterns into Groove Agent SE. We'll show you how to do that. And reading through Greg's question here. Okay, so we'll go over some of that. So some of the pitch correct methods. All right, wait just a couple minutes as we have some more questions coming in. If you guys maybe want to just do a quick introduction of who you are and where you're at, it could be interesting to see. I'm currently in Northern Virginia area. My name's Greg Undo, just outside DC. All right, so we have some more people logging in. If you guys have more topics you want covered, feel free to go ahead and put them into the comments section. We'll wait just a couple minutes, get started. All right, so I see Mo Jackson from Baltimore, Maryland. All right, you're pretty close. Omaha, Nebraska. Portland, Oregon. All right, it's interesting. Louisiana. Reading, Pennsylvania. I have a cousin who lives there. I have family that grew up outside of Reading, Pennsylvania. All right. And Southern California. All right, some more people logging in. So we'll get started in just about a minute or two. And for people who are just joining in, if you want to just type a quick comment where you're located at. And one quick question for the people that are on the West Coast: does this time work okay for you, or would it maybe alternate meetings to be on West Coast time at 7 p.m. or East Coast time? If you have a preference, just let me know in the comments. All right, and for those that are watching after, we're just getting everyone kind of logged in. This will be available to watch afterwards. Usually goes up in a few hours afterwards, so you can kind of go back and rewatch it if you want to, or you can catch it live. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So the top of the questions, we had a couple questions about scoring and notation, about using repeats, and also for dealing with some of the staccato symbols and stuff like that. So let's take a quick look at just some of the scoring functionality in Cubase. A lot of times when we actually see a particular MIDI part, it may kind of look like a normal MIDI part directly on the screen here. But when we go into our notation editor, it could often look kind of like a jumbled mess, kind of like this. So what I wanted to be able to do is, one of the key distinctions is, in the eyes of the computer, if we go back out to the main program window here, we can see if we zoom in pretty significantly that maybe it's a little bit late there, it's a little bit early here. So what we want to be able to do is, when we look at it in standard notation, we want to be able to have the music have the same musical feel that was originally intended, but we want it to be notated as if it was heavily quantized. So if I wanted to, what I could do is just double click to the left here. And then I could go to my staff settings, and this would open up my score settings. So if I come here, we'll go to our main tab. So we have our staff tab going into the main tab. And now if I wanted to, I could actually just set my key here. I believe the song's in A flat. And we have a concept of display quantize. So if I wanted to, I could come right here and just choose to say the smallest note I intended to play was an eighth note. The smallest note I intended here was a quarter note. And now we want to be able to do a display quantize where we won't actually move the notes at all. And perhaps I want this to be a grand staff, so we could split it at the pitch of C3. So in just a couple of minutes, I could come directly here and just hit apply, and what we would normally see is kind of musical gibberish. We have the capability here of hitting apply and having it appear as kind of standard notation that's very legible to musicians. Now, as we work on this, we could also just kind of double click a lot of elements to change things. So let's say if I wanted to put in a repeat sign right here. So one of the questions, and you wanted that repeat sign to actually just follow. So if we put our repeat symbol in there, we could just double click on that part. And then if you go to the upper toolbar here, this info line, you could actually see your arranger track. I think by default this isn't checked. So now once we see the arranger track active here, you'll see this little series of icons. You can now just simply activate arranger mode. So as we would play this part, we'll go ahead and just listen to this Rhodes. And it would just repeat just like it's written. So that way we could actually have different types of articulations for doing codas and repeats and stuff like that that actually follow the musical score versus what's actually on the project window. Now, there's another question about dealing with different articulations. So if I wanted to come here, I'll just go to another project where we could add some of these. Let me just find this project here. So we open up sequence of Brandenburg concertos. So if I wanted to come here, we could have, we'll probably have some different samples that will be loading up here. We'll just wait a minute here. Now, if I wanted to look at a particular sample here, we could, if I wanted to go to my violin section, I can now look at this in our notation view. Now, we have introduced since Cubase 5 something called expression maps. So what I could do now is actually just come here and I could select particular articulations. And a lot of orchestral sample libraries will actually have multiple articulation types so that you could switch between spiccato, legato, tremolo, different trills. So now if I wanted to come here, I could actually just go to my expression map, and if I wanted to add, I think I could select a number of notes here, and then we'll just say we want these to be let's say pizzicato. And now you could actually just kind of put in the different trills. And you could actually do this also directly inside of the key editor. So if I come right here, I could actually now come to my key editor. So we'll go to our MIDI and go to key editor. And you could actually see all the different articulations mapped out for you right here. So if I want to select a range of notes, I could say, okay, we want these notes to be legato here. So we could zoom in and say, okay, let's just find legato or pizzicato. So at this point, you could just switch. So we can say we want those to be pizzicato, these here to be spiccato. And depending on what articulation that it's actually in the sample library, you can now just switch all of the articulations. And what's cool about this is this could automatically carry over directly into the score editor. So if I actually come right here, I could open this selection and you could see the different articulations that have been added directly in here as well. So this way you could actually have the MIDI meaning of like if it has staccato or legato. So depending on the library, these could automatically switch not only the playback, but could switch the sample set that's being used to actually be able to handle all those so it sounds like a realistic orchestral interpretation done in MIDI. All right, so let's take a look at the next question we had. All right, so let's say if you wanted to create your own drum patterns inside of Cubase and then import those into Groove Agent. There's a couple ways to do that. We'll just start with a new empty project. And I'm just going to add an instrument track, and we'll call it Groove Agent SE. And I'll go ahead and just load up a kit. All right, so now we have our samples loaded up. And let's say I wanted to make my own quick drum pattern here inside of Cubase. So I'll do a two measure pattern. And what I want to do is I could actually kind of set the drum map from the instrument itself. So now when I double click, we could actually go directly into our drum editor. And let me just program a really horrible drum beat. And we'll put this into a loop. So we'll just kind of cycle. So we could actually kind of find the sounds here. And we'll say I'll just quantize these real quick. And I can grab my drumstick, and let's say I just have and I'll change my quantize setting here so we can just kind of put in some more. All right, so let's say I want to take that awful sounding drum beat and now actually put it onto a pattern pad. So if I have pads that are dedicated to particular sounds, and then I could have pads that are dedicated to patterns. So if I wanted to just drag and drop, I can now just trigger that pattern directly from the actual pad on Groove Agent itself. Now there's also a question about time stretching. So let's say there's a couple ways that you could do time stretching of files. The easiest way is taking the cursor tool here and using sizing applies time stretch. So when I wanted to come here, I could actually just say, I need this audio file. And what I could do is go to the lower edge, and then as soon as I just drag the edge of the file, that will automatically time compress that file based on that time that I've just dragged right there. So very easy to kind of just visually time stretch just like that. Now there's other ways of doing it as well. So if I wanted to come right here and go to my process menu, here you could also see, I believe there's time stretch in here, or is it just kind of moved? Yeah, so you could just do your time stretch here. So if I'll take this track out of musical mode real quick. Then process, time stretch, and then you can have your time stretch dialog here. So this way I could say I could do this in bars, beats, or actual tempo. So you could do samples, seconds, tempos, and you have different types of time algorithms right here as well. So that's an easy way of kind of doing time stretch. Now, if you wanted to take an entire project, which is pretty common, and do time stretching. So let's say if we have this track here, it's a nice R&B track. I could go into the pool menu, and what I want to do is make sure that all the tracks are set to musical mode. And you can do this quite easily by going to the media menu into the pool window, and you could select all your files. Now what you need is kind of an origin tempo. So you need to have kind of what the original tempo of the files were. In this case, it was 72 beats a minute. And then you'll have a little thing here that says musical mode. So as soon as, if you wanted to check that, you could place this in musical mode. And usually Cubase will do this by default. And now, whatever tempo that you kind of enter in, so if I'm in 72, I type in 88, or 60 beats a minute. And you could just, in real time stretch all the audio while it plays without doing any processing whatsoever. So time stretching can be fairly simple using either the time stretching sizing tool, doing it as an offline process, or just doing it in real time. That way you could speed up or slow down an entire track pretty quickly. So, Maurice, I think that covered your questions. If you have more questions, feel free to kind of pipe it in. All right. So Greg had a question about using the pitch correct plugin as well as adjusting through the Very Audio. It's really, you don't have to use both of them simultaneously. But often what I do is, as an insert, you're going to have the capability of running under pitch, the pitch correct plugin. And once this is enabled, you could set the key of the song. If you don't know the key, you could actually just choose to be chromatic, so it'll snap to the nearest note. And as you just simply will turn this on, this will process that vocal file in real time. So we just listen to that vocal file. Let me adjust my gain structure in my mix here just a little bit. So that way it'll actually kind of process it in real time, but doesn't actually affect the original audio. So it's just processing it on the fly. And that's kind of a quick and almost a quick dirty way to do the pitch correction. Now, you could also just double click to go into the Very Audio editor. So a lot of times, maybe perhaps on background vocals or something that you just want to clean up just a little bit, I would do the pitch correct plugin. If I wanted to have more detailed control, I would just go to the sample editor by double clicking on a file, go to the Very Audio tab, and then we'll have the pitch and warp. What you want to do is just simply come here and activate that, and that will actually do an analysis of the entire audio file for you. You don't have to record it in real time, and you'll see here in just a second that will just kind of pop up. And it's doing its analysis, about a 5-minute long song. And now I'm able to just kind of move my audio freely here. So if I wanted to take an individual phrase and be able to kind of say, okay, I want to take this phrase and quantize the pitch to the nearest notes, I could do that. Or if I wanted to use just the straighten pitch here, I could just do that on a selected note, and we could zoom in here so you can see this a little better. So if I just choose my straighten pitch, this way you could kind of minimize vibrato, or if you're kind of going for a very processed vocal sound, you could kind of select a number of files and be able to kind of do this. Now, one of the other things that the Very Audio allows you to do is to easily kind of translate this into MIDI. So if I wanted to, I could now just say, since it's kind of figured out the rhythm as well as the pitch of the notes, we can now extract this as MIDI data. So when I come here, now you're able to transcribe your MIDI parts, and you can see exactly what the melody was in the MIDI domain. So I kind of use the pitch shift plugin for kind of quick, dirty stuff, and for more processing at kind of a more of a micro level, I would choose to use the Very Audio. So sometimes if you use a combination of both, what can happen is as you're correcting the pitch, it can then still run through the pitch shift plugin, so that could give you some unwanted results. But so you can definitely kind of play around with those settings, but that's kind of how I use it. All right, so we had a couple of questions came in via email regarding automation and how to adjust different automation points. So if I wanted to come here, let's say we'll just take we'll take the lead vocal track here. Now, there's a couple different ways of actually creating different volume changes for an audio file. One is you could actually just come right here, and then once you have the clip selected, you have a volume handle. So here you could just adjust the clip gain, and you could also just do this straight from the info line here. So if I select that value, I could just go to my info line and adjust my clip gain and get an additional 24 dB of gain or cut. That's one way. Another way is to actually just use the pencil tool directly on the part, and that way you could have different automation curves and different volume controls. Now the clip-based as well as this event-based automation happens before the signal hits the mixer. So a lot of people use that to kind of regulate volumes before hitting a compression stage. So this way we could actually have everything kind of regulated and use the compressor for particular effects. Now to check out the channel automation that's tied to the fader, we can now just come right here, go to the lower left-hand corner, and we could adjust, and we could draw this in. So as we would play this back, we could see the automation follow here. We'll make this a little bigger. So say we're going to have our vocal kind of get louder. We'll see the automation. Now, a couple questions came in asking, it's like, okay, how do I just change all of the automation values? There's a couple ways of doing it. One is to select it right here. You could go to the info line and just simply adjust the value right there. So, and I'm just scrolling with my mouse wheel up or down, or you could enter in a value and it'll keep the proportionality. If you wanted to scale, if you go to the center area here, you could actually scale your automation just like that. Or if you wanted to kind of compress it a little bit and bring it more to the center line, you could go to the right center edge and be able to kind of compress or expand, or just kind of adjust the values right there. And you could also come to the edge and kind of just take the ending of the automation and be able to kind of treat that independently of the beginning of the automation. But to adjust the values, you can select it right here with the info line. You could also just grab the center line, and you actually will see the value. While you don't see the value represented here, if you select an automation node, you could actually see the value represented right here on the automation curve as well as here. So if I wanted to adjust that automation point, we'll zoom in so it's a little easier to see. We could just freely adjust that automation point. So if you need it to be at exactly minus 6 dB or minus 12 dB, you can make your adjustments there. So I think that covers some of the automation questions that we had. We'll see if we had some more questions kind of coming in. All right, so we had also a question on how to use, a simple question that's often missed on how to kind of use effect sends. So a lot of times, let's say if I have my vocal here and we wanted to run it through different effects such as like a reverb or a delay, how can we do that? So there's two different ways of routing effects. You're going to have one that's an insert, as well as another method would be using it as an effect send. So an insert effect would be dedicated to a particular channel. And that's fine, and it's often used for plugins kind of like compressors and EQs where you want individual settings. And a send will have the effect, will have one effect that's going to be shared across multiple channels. And you often see this with a reverb or delay effect. And as we do this, we can now just choose to have the same effect but varying amounts of that effect. So if I wanted to come here, let's say I'll start off with our lead vocal. And now when you start off, you could actually, when you go to your inserts here, you could just see your list of plugins that show up here. So you will see all of your list of available plugins. So a lot of people run stuff as inserts, but when you see it as a send, you don't really see all of the plugins show up because they need to actually be accessed directly from an effects channel track. Now, if you don't want to create an effects channel track and you're in your send, you could also come here. So I'm going to add an effects channel track, and I'll just right click here. This is one way of doing it. So I can say, let's add an effects channel track, and I want this to be a delay effect, and we'll say, okay, a stereo delay. Now that will show up, and this creates an effects return channel. So this will show up in our effects channels right there. So now that I've created that, when I go to my send effects, I could have my stereo delay be an available effect send. So now I could turn this on and adjust the amount. So if we listen to this vocal, we could go from kind of a drier signal
softly in my ear, I love you. In my ear, I love
so if I wanted more of that delay, so that way I could have that. Now, a way that was added in Cubase 7 to add an effects channel is to actually just right click, and then you can say, let's add an effects channel send to effects channel send 4. And you can say here, I wanted to have a reverb, and I want it to be the Revelation reverb. So I'll just come here, and now we could add the effect send directly there. It's then activated, and you could set your amounts. So that way, so an insert, think of it as being dedicated to a particular channel, and as well as having the capability of sends being able to be used across multiple channels. So if I go to my background vocals, I can now say I want to have the background vocals access that same stereo delay, but with less amount. So this way the background vocals can have less or more. So the tracks can go to the different effects return channels, but in varying amounts. So, all right, now we had a question on the channel strip settings. Someone wanted to know how to change the order of the effects. So if we wanted to actually have like the inserts come before, or the EQs come before the inserts within our channel strip settings. So just switch projects here. All right, so if I wanted to open up a particular channel, we could click on the edit button here. So this kind of mimics our signal flow here. So if I wanted to, what we'll see first is kind of the channel strip, your inserts, your EQ here, and your sends. So there's a little button right here that will actually allow you to toggle the signal flow position of inserts and the channel strip, which could include the EQ position as well. So this way you could have the channel strip with the EQ coming first, and if you wanted to change the signal order of that, or if you wanted the inserts to come before the channel strip and the EQ. So this way you could have everything kind of set up exactly how you want those different elements to be added. So again, it's a very subtle little change. So just simply come right there and move those back and forth. Now, as we had another question about using the chord track, so let's open up a quick demonstration of the chord track. Okay, I'm seeing a bunch more comments coming in. All right. All right, so let's talk about the chord track. So one of the cool things that if you have the chord track, if you haven't really kind of played around with it, there's some really neat things you could do with it. So if you're just kind of starting off writing a song, I see the comment about the cursor visibility. I don't think there's a way to make the cursor more visible. I'll try to kind of highlight it. I think some of it may get lost in kind of the real-time nature of the Google streaming here. I'll try to see if I can maybe get like a really obvious cursor here. But we'll start off with the chord track. All right, so we'll start, and I just wanted to come here. And let's just enter in a couple of chords here. So the cool thing is you can say, okay, I want to start off with an F chord. And let's say going to B flat. And we could try out different chord progressions and maybe ending with a C chord. Now, if you haven't really used a chord track, and let's say if you're not so up to date on different harmonies, what you could actually do, or chord progression ideas, is actually go to the chord assistant, and this could actually give you chord suggestions that make sense musically. Now let's say if you have this and now a singer is singing and they wanted to switch to keys, all you have to do now is actually go here to the root key, and you can say, okay, we want to go down a half step. Or up a half step. Now, you can also just select this track here and choose, if you go to the right click, go to chord track and say make chords. Oh, don't, instead of make chords, I'm sorry, we want to select chords to MIDI. My fault. And that will then turn that into MIDI data. Now, another way of doing this is to actually just simply drag. So if I wanted to, I can now just simply come right here and edit these values. I had two questions about this for people not being able to really edit a particular note right there. So if I wanted to just switch that note, or just simply say I want to move these notes earlier, I could select both these values. Select both these parts here, hit enter, and then kind of move those, and we could choose to enlarge the part. So now we listen to it. Now, if I wanted to actually just kind of change the length of the parts, again, I could go into my key editor here. Now, sometimes what I found is, depending on the instrument sound, you may not extend, it may not play the note all the way to the end. So I just had that on a loop. So let's say if I just come here. So I had a couple people write me saying that they're having a hard time just kind of editing those chords together. But it seems I didn't run into that issue. They seem to, once you just kind of edit all the data, that they were all kind of editable as you saw fit. So I hope that was helpful with that, because we had two people asked about that question there. And I see a question about kind of the automation values. So if you actually do have the automation, is, let's say I have this automation point here, and if you do watch right here, we can see the values updated, at least right here on the info line. So you can see the value right there. So if you just kind of look there, that might help you. All right. So we had a question about exploding MIDI parts. So let's say if I came here and I wanted to take all my MIDI data here, so and turn it into different tracks, like for a brass part. So if I have, let's say, starting off from a chord track, because this would be kind of easy way to see this value here. So let's say I want a G going to E minor to a C to a D7. So we'll go ahead and just kind of listen to this, and we can see if this pattern works for you. So if I wanted to explode these and get them ready for different musicians, I'll just select this part right here. I'll right click, and let's say this is just really to create that actual MIDI data. So I'm going to say chords to MIDI. So now if I go into my score editor, I may see something that looks like this, where I see all my different notes. So we'll just go ahead and rewind here. And we just enable the... So let's say our chords look like this, and I'll just do a quick split staff. So let's say I want to be in the key of, we'll go to our staff settings here. We're in the key of G, and we want a grand staff. Okay, so if we have this now, and I wanted to select all the notes, we could go to the scores menu, and then we have, it looks like 4 voices, and we'll go to functions, and we could choose explode. And what I want to do is actually set these to new tracks. So now I can hit OK. And what it's done, if I did it correctly, is now we have the top voice here, the bottom voice, the second voice, and the third voice. So this way they're all kind of split into their own individual tracks. So again, just come right here, and you could choose to go to your scores menu, to functions, and then explode right there. Now you could also just kind of, if I wanted to take an actual brass part, which is what the original question was on, I think I have a quick brass part in a project here. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, right here. I see a question about third-party plugin automation values. They would all just show up in the same info line area. So once you have that parameter selected, All right, so let's say if we have a brass part here, we'll just go ahead and solo this. And again, if I wanted to split, select that part right there, and then you can actually go to functions, explode. Just go, I'll open a selection in the score editor. So again, functions. I'll go to page mode here real quick. And now we can see those parts just kind of split out just like that. So very easy to kind of break up your MIDI notes as you see fit. Now, we had a quick question on, you may notice that certain projects have if we have particular tracks, that we could actually have different values that are kind of locked to the top. So there's one question, and we do this in a couple different files. One of them that comes in real handy is if you're actually having, let me just find a particular file, and this file has video, or you can do it with any track, but there's a function called the divide track list. So if I come here, we could now, you may notice that as I scroll up and down in my project menu here, or within the project window, rather, that my scoring will actually stay on top. So you could actually pick and choose different tracks to always be anchored to the top. And this is a little subtle setting kind of right here. So if you kind of go to the upper right hand corner and then down, you'll see this little dividing line, and that's called the divide track list. So as soon as I would take that off, now as I scroll up, I could have all my tracks just scroll up right there, and my video window is now at the bottom. So if I have my video window at the top of my project, I'll just relocate this. As I scroll down, my video window disappears. But if you want, you could just enable, and again, just go to the upper right-hand corner, and you'll see a divide track list. And if you wanted a particular track, I think if you just kind of right-click, I'm trying to remember where this setting was, where you could just kind of toggle the status of this particular track. Let me just take a look at my track control settings here. I'm just kind of blanking on where it is, but it's kind of a right click on the track itself, and that would allow you to actually pick which tracks, usually by default like video tracks or audio tracks can be, or marker tracks can be anchored directly on top here. So if you just click on toggle track list, so that would enable you to have the file have the track go directly into the main body or to be anchored on top. So that's what the toggle track list function will allow you to do. Okay, so we had a question about using, I think it's one of the people that's online, about using like plugins strictly for monitoring that aren't applied to the bounce down, and if you had to create kind of a parallel signal path for that. There's a real handy way of doing this. So let's say if I have a particular project, and we'll activate this project. And if we go to our mixer, a lot of times if we put a particular plugin, let's say on the master fader of our mixer, so if we come here to our channel strip or our inserts, this particular plugin will then be rendered when we do an export audio mixdown. And that may not be what you wanted to intend. I think the question was originally from a room correction plugin that they just wanted it for the monitoring purposes but not included in the mixdown section. Now, Cubase has an entire section here called the control room. And the control room allows you to adjust the monitoring volume only without affecting the actual gain structure of the mixer. You could set up different headphone mixes, different cue mixes, all right here in the control room. And the recent free version to 7.5, recent update 7.5.2 has actually added some graphical enhancements. And one of the things that was really one of the things that I had asked for personally was to make sure that the control room knob was like really obvious. So now you have kind of like the big obvious red control room knob, and this is kind of your volume control. Now you could actually set up the control room directly from your actual VST connections window. So if you actually go here to your studio, your control room can contain a talkback. You could have up to 6 external devices, such as like a DVD player, your iPad, your iPod, a 2-track, or maybe an old DAT machine. You could have 4 different cue mixes, and these are like headphone mixes for musicians. So if you want to have an independent headphone mix for vocals, for guitars, bass, and drums, where they could each have kind of their more me headphone mix, you could do that quite easily. And you could also have up to 4 different speaker options here. So you could toggle between like a Genelec 5.1 setup or to Yamaha speakers, an Auratone or Focals, whatever speakers that you have. And you could just label these kind of as you see fit. So once you have this set up, and these use the available inputs and outputs of your audio interface. So it makes it really pretty slick, because you could actually not have any signal degradation when you go and actually want to work with different, like as opposed to working with hardware, where if you're going through any hardware, you're introducing additional circuitry and can affect kind of the integrity of your audio file. So now if I wanted to come here, we could switch between our 4 different speakers. Now, if I come here, I could actually see these labeled. So if I wanted to switch between my Genelecs to my Yamahas, to the Auratone, to the Focal, I could just switch, and these could be in any configuration: stereo, mono, surround, whatever configuration that you want. Now, each of these speakers can also, if you click here on the setup page in the lower right-hand corner, you'll have a little setup tab. Here you could actually have effect plugins, and you can have inserts that are dedicated to particular speakers. So here, if you wanted to run a EQ or a room correction plugin, let's say perhaps you didn't like how the sound of your speakers were, and you knew that you needed to compensate in your room by boosting the bass or whatever, you could come here and you could actually run plugins here that are solely for the monitoring source that don't affect the final export audio mixdown. So this is kind of a separate monitoring stage. So you could come here, and each monitor, as you switch, so if I go to a different monitor, I could have up to 4 independent chains for each monitor, and each monitor could have up to 8 independent effects plugins directly on that for doing different processing for monitoring without affecting your actual recorded signal. All right, so let's take a look, see if you have more questions as we go along. If I'm not covering something well, feel free to go ahead and comment. I'm just going to refresh, make sure I'm not missing stuff in the comments here. All right, so we had some questions on using side chaining. I'm just going to review some of the questions, make sure I'm not missing anything here. That's okay. Okay, so let's see. So I think for the question about the automation, let me know if that kind of makes sense for you, what we did. Okay, so let's say an automation delay. So we had a question from Maurice. Go back and we'll take a look at the automation delay. So I think maybe if you wanted to take the automation and adjust the parameters to move it earlier or later in time. So let's say I have my automation here and I just wanted to move that particular automation. I could now just come here again to the info line, and at this point I can move it by beat or by measure, right here. So you could do all that data right there with your automation. Now, if you find that you have automation tied to an event, so let's say if I come here, by default there's a preference where you could have the automation follows events. So this way, if automation is tied to a particular event, at that point when I move the event, the automation is automatically going to be directly tied right there with that. So so we'll get into some side chaining in just a minute. Let's see, we had some other topics. Okay, so we had a question from Todd about using how to route in a MIDI controller to an instrument track and then route that to audio at the same time. This is a really handy little trick to do, especially if you wanted to have someone record the virtual instrument as MIDI and audio simultaneously. So we'll go ahead and get this set up, then we'll go on to some side chaining. Okay, so let's say if I have my instrument track, and we'll just load up Halion Sonic SE. And let's say I just have my default synth here. Okay, so now what I could do is actually just come here, and there's two ways of doing this. One is I could go to my VST connections, and I could make an output channel. So I could create a bus here, we'll say a stereo bus, and we'll just call this our VST audio bus. And see if I don't open up the project settings. All right, so. And what's kind of interesting is this bus doesn't actually have to be connected. So I can create an output bus, or I could create a group bus. So we'll say a group bus, and we'll call this our VST group. So now I'll just real quickly open up our audio characteristics of the instrument here. So let's say if I wanted to go to my channel, I'll just come right here and we'll go to our channel settings. So now if I wanted to, I could just simply route this to either my output bus, or if I wanted to just go directly, I could also send it to a group here. So if I say let's send it to our group channel, we'll enable that. Then let's create an audio. We'll create an audio channel. And we'll make this a stereo track. And then on its input, I just want to choose my VST audio bus. So now I'm going to record enable both of these tracks. And then I'm going to just use my virtual keyboard here on my transport. So it's a really handy virtual controller. So if you right click on your transport panel, we can now come here. Okay, so now if I have this set up correctly, let's see if I did it right. I can now just play this. Oh, I'm going to send it to my group. Sorry. All right, so now I have my group set as my input. And then I'll just come here and play some MIDI notes. So that way you're able to actually record the MIDI and the audio simultaneously. So you could either set the group, and since I didn't set the output bus up, I could just now come right here and just set the group up, or I could set the VST audio bus up, and then you could actually just kind of group these two elements together. So if you just select Control G, I'll just turn this off just because when you have the keyboard on now, it will kind of bypass some of your keyboard shortcuts. So now as I move one, the MIDI and the audio will automatically be tied together. So if you do this type of work a lot, you may find yourself to the point where you need to just, have a couple of phantom group channels that are set up so you could have quick routing activated as well. So that way you could always just kind of have that really quick. So if someone comes maybe with a controller keyboard, you want them to capture the sound of their controller, of their keyboard, and the sound of the VST instrument and print it as audio in real time during the performance, it's very easy to do. So again, set up in the VST connections. We'll come right over here and set up either a phantom output channel or a phantom group. And again, they don't have to be routed anywhere, so you're not using any physical inputs and outputs of your audio interface. And then you're able to just simply do that real-time routing inside of the program and have sample accurate, and then just you can group those two tracks together and you'll be all set, ready to go. All right, I'm going to scroll through some more of the comments. I think for web video that we had, I think with the control room for your room correction plugin. All right. All right, so we're getting some side chaining here in just a minute. Let me see if there's any other quick things. Okay, we'll touch on some arranger track. Then we'll get to side chaining, seems to be a popular topic. All right, so let's take a look at the arranger track. This is kind of an often overlooked feature. It's really pretty slick in what you can do with it. So let's say if I have a particular project here. You can have what's called an arranger track, because Cubase was the first program that really popularized kind of the whole concept of a linear project window where you could see exactly where your tracks came in, where they went out, and you could visualize things very quickly, very easily. But we may want to run into scenarios where we have the need for perhaps maybe a couple of different versions of songs. So maybe you're doing a jingle and you needed a 15-second version to fit in between a YouTube ad, or you needed a 30-second version, a 60-second version, or a 5-minute long form ad version for YouTube. But it's kind of using the same music. So you can right click here and add what's called an arranger track. So we're going to add the arranger track. And this also kind of would automatically correspond to making sure that the arranger function is active. So right click within the transport bar here. You could right click for the arranger track and make sure that this is, and you'll see this part show up, and this is similar to what we saw directly in the score editor. Now, using your pencil tool, we can just draw in and define our part. So we can say this is the bridge of the song, and maybe I liked this part within the bridge and another nested part and a nested part there. So this will create parts, and these could be labeled as intro, verse, chorus, bridge, and guitar solo, whatever. So now we could actually come here and go to our play order, and we could have multiple play orders activated. So if I wanted to come here, let's say instead of playing the project back linearly, so if we listen to it now,
It all began the moment I laid eyes on him. He touched my.
so instead of it playing back totally linearly, what I could do now is activate this, and you could take your order here. So if I wanted to create a new play order, I could just say we're going to create a new chain, and then what you're able to do is to just drag and say I want to go from that to the intro to one bar, and maybe a 1-beat breakdown. So if I wanted to now play through these different play orders, I'll go here, activate this right on my main project window, and now I'll hit play for the intro. You'll see it repeat and kind of jump.
All at once, he kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears all fly away. Don't it make it falling before I knew. All at once, he kissed my face. The world was like a brand new place. Felt my fears.
So you can see it jump around as it's playing.
Don't it make it feel good?
So that way you could have this. Now, if we have our non-linear arrangement that's kind of jumping all over the screen, and I want to turn it into a linear arrangement, I could just choose to click right here and say flatten chain. And what that'll do is that'll copy all the parts out as if it was playing back in a straight linear fashion, and you could choose to undo that as well, and that way you could work in both the linear and non-linear worlds within your same project window. All right, gonna check a couple, see if there's more topics that have come in here. All right, then we'll get onto some side chaining here. We had some questions about that. Any topics that have been covered so far that you wanted to kind of something wasn't clear on, please let me know. All right, so just kind of going through some of the topics here. I'm just going to refresh and kind of check out the topics, make sure I'm not missing any. Sorry if you hear dogs in the background. My neighbor's dogs are out. So, all right. And we're also letting this kind of buffer and catch up here. All right, so let's take a look at some side chaining. So we have some questions on this. We just go ahead and open up project here. Okay, and we had a question on the beatbox inside of Halion Sonic 2. We'll go over that after we do some side chaining. All right, so when we come over here to side chaining, there's a couple of different approaches for doing side chaining. So if I wanted to like open up a compressor on a particular track from another track, and you often see this like especially in EDM music, maybe different kicks that will actually send the side chain to the bass. So if I wanted to come here, what you could do is actually open up an insert effect, and if you wanted to, you could just say, let's just grab this, and I wanted to have a side chainable, let's say a vintage compressor. So we'll just come right here. I think this has side chain. All right, so now we're going to activate the side chain for this channel. And what we want to do is to send the bass track right here. And we want the kick drum track to actually fire off that. So I could actually go to my sends. And then as soon as that has been activated, I could just see my send right here for my vintage compressor and turn this on. And this way, as I would now play, that would be side chaining that bass track. So this way, the bass track's insert is now being triggered, and if I wanted to send a little more signal out, I could just kind of come here to my send level and send this out. So if I wanted to now send more of that signal directly out to the Now you can also do this for groups, and so if I wanted to take like an entire, let me see if I have a project that would have something applicable. I guess I could do it here. So if I wanted to take my drums here, and let's say if I route all of my drums to a particular bus, which I think I have set up here. So I'm going to take my drum tracks, and first thing I want to do is actually I'm going to create a group channel. So we're going to add a group channel here. We're making a stereo group, and the groups will be added at the bottom in case you don't see it initially. And now I want to be able to send all these tracks to my group 1. So now all the selected tracks have now been sent to group 1. So now at this point, if I wanted the group to have the bass on it, I could come, or the compressor rather, I could just come right here, and let's say we wanted to have my standard compressor plugged in here. We'll activate the side chain. And now I could have the group, the bass here, send directly out to the compressor. Now, sometimes people may just take one track and leave that track, and you could also just duplicate that particular bass track. So this way, you could have this bass going to the stereo out, and this bass sending out to the compressor. So now, so I wanted to do this. So the drums are now being compressed by the duplicated bass track. Now you can also send your drums to kind of if you wanted to create like a parallel processing, we could come right here, and then I wanted to create, let's say, a new track, and let's create a secondary group channel. So we'll make it a stereo bus, and we'll give it our drums 2. We'll give it a name here. And then in our sends, so we'll add our secondary group, and in our sends, we can now send these all to, we'll send these all to our drums 2 bus. And I'm just going to hold down kind of Alt Shift, and I believe this will carry over. So now all the drums are being sent to 2 different buses. So if you wanted to set up like a parallel processing, we can now come right over here. And this way you could have more dynamics processing on one of the tracks versus less. So this way you could often kind of find a sweet spot between your parallel compression. So one group could be created that's heavily compressed, and the other group could not be compressed, and you could kind of just go back and forth and find those actual sweet spots kind of right there to be able to dial it in. And this is often what you hear on like lead vocal tracks, where you have especially in like a lot of early Motown records, where the vocals aren't necessarily super loud in the mix, but they kind of cut through, and that's kind of using parallel compression. So you could use that through your different groups. Now, something else that's kind of interesting is you can now, within your channel strip itself, so if I come here to my noise gate or my compressors here, as well as my transient designer, and we'll kind of blow these up a little bit so you can see. But these 3 will also have available side chain inputs. So this way you could send one track, 2 groups if you wanted to do like different side chainable elements, so you could have those placed just on your groups as well. So that way you could kind of have, other tracks control the dynamics of particular tracks and group them together. So pretty flexible with that. All right, so now we had a question about using the B-Box. So inside of Halion Sonic 2. So we'll start with a brand new project here. I haven't used this in a while, so I may be a little rusty. All right, so Halion Sonic 2 is kind of like the big brother to what we see that comes bundled with the Halion Sonic SE. So now if I wanted to come here, you could have kind of a whole slew of different instruments. So if you wanted to just kind of see your different instruments that are available, so if you wanted to, for instance, have different, like your organ, you could just simply load up different organ presets. And then when I come here, I could actually, when I go to edit, you could choose to actually see that the actual GUI user interface right here. So if I want to load up a different instrument, you could also just come right over here to Bbox. And Bbox is one of these instrument sets that comes with it. So this way, it's almost like having multiple instruments, but you could actually have the Halion Sonic to be the player for all these different instruments. So think of it as the engine that's playing back. So now if I just want to come here, we could double click, load up a preset. And then when we go to edit, we see the GUI for the actual Bbox. So if I wanted to come here, we can now just kind of, and just like a typical pattern grid, you could come here and you could see kind of the names. Making horrible drum sounds tonight. All right. And then you could actually just load up kind of different patterns and save your different patterns. But you could have a number of different patterns kind of all done there. Now, if you really like a particular pattern, so, and of course this would automatically synchronize with the actual, with the tempo of the project, you can trigger the individual samples here. Or if you wanted to, just, but if you wanted to actually take this into your project window, you could just come right over here and just drag and drop. And the pattern that was created directly in the project window is now right on your project. So you could have it either completely synchronize. So if I come here, you could just have it play stop, and then you could synchronize that with the actual project, with the transport of the project. And then you could also adjust different cutoffs, tuning. So if you wanted to select, so you select the sound here. Panning it. So whatever sound you kind of have selected here. Run through different filters. And then you also have your mix levels here. So if you wanted to add reverb on particular sounds, and plus you could have all of your different outputs routing here. So you could run it through additional effect processing directly inside of your Cubase mixer. But this way you have, you know, not only do you have like your different reverb effects here, different performance controls, your mixer, so if you wanted to adjust your mix volume, and your patterns, so if you want to program your own patterns or just load up kind of a whole slew of preset patterns, it's very, very handy. And again, that's all completely synchronized with your Cubase project window as well. So a great little addition for, you know, having your own kind of beat sequencer within an instrument. And then if you wanted to come here to a completely different sound, you could just say, okay, I want it now to go to my Mellotron type of instrument. So you could just come right here, open up your different instruments and be able to have all of your different sounds. So I could have my orchestral samples. I could come right here and see my Mellotron. Or if I wanted to select my Bbox, and here I wanted to see something from my Halion Symphonic Orchestra, we have all of this control inside of Halion Sonic. And what's cool about it is as you just kind of switch, it's like having multiple instruments. Now, some people may ask, what's the difference between Halion and Halion Sonic? Halion Sonic will allow you to kind of play back all the sounds, and Halion will give you the ability to actually create your own sounds and do all of your key mappings and everything like that. So if you're really into designing your own sounds, Halion is a really amazing sound design tool. That's your synthesizer, has your chord, has your organ synthesis, as well as your sampler, all in one instrument with tremendous effects and routing capabilities. If you just want a whole slew of great sounds to kind of work with, the Halion Sonic is a great place to go with that, and all of your presets from Halion Sonic SE, and the same basic operation where you have 16-part multi-timbrality here with unlimited voices of polyphony, all your patches. You could choose your zones, what MIDI channel if you're layering. So very easy, powerful interface with a lot of really incredible sounds inside of it. So Halion Sonic 2 is a great little desert island instrument. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out, I think you could actually get the trial version directly from within your Cubase program to try it out, or download the trial version. But it's a really amazing sounding instrument. All right, so let's see. I'll go through and go through a couple, see if there's more questions. Let me just refresh, see if there's more questions that have come in. All right, so we had a question from Elliot just on the with the example of the audio to MIDI. So you don't have to do that in real time. As they're recorded together, you could just simply choose to take those existing parts at any time and just render it as well. So one quick way of doing it is, if once you have everything done in MIDI, you could just simply set up that routing process. Or another way of doing it that's really handy, especially in large projects, this is about rendering the VST instruments into audio, is if you come here, let's go to a large project here. Let me just find a quick one. All right, so let's say this project, which has 119 tracks or something. And let's say if I wanted to take, there's a really handy thing here called the batch export. So if I have a number of audio tracks, MIDI tracks, drum tracks here, so let's say my bass tracks, keyboards, as well as some rolled instruments, guitars, vocals, etc. So a lot of different tracks here. One of the things that's really handy, you could do this within its own project, but if you go to the export audio mix down, you could choose, there's a little checkbox here for batch export. So once you have the channel batch export active, here, if I just wanted to take all my VST instrument channels, I could actually just say I want this channel, this channel, this channel, and that channel, and I could render all these channels in one time and import them as audio tracks within the project. Now, this is also really handy if you wanted to archive all of your stuff, if you need to hand it off to someone who's maybe not smart enough to be running Steinberg software. You can now come right here and you could select all of the output channels, all the group channels, all of the effects channels, all the VST instrument channels, and your audio channels, and you could actually create a new project which is all of the audio, which will give you equal length audio files. So at this point, you could just have basically like stems that have been created. And at that point, you're able to just hand it off, and anyone running any recording system could just simply load them in and start all the files at the same time, and you'll have your project. So if whether you want to do it for one particular instrument or 3 or 4 instruments, you could do that. If you want to do the real-time recording, you're able to do that. It doesn't have to be simultaneously while you're recording your audio and MIDI, but you're able to have control of multiple ways of being able to turn your virtual instruments into audio tracks. We'll go through a couple more, see if there's more questions that have come up here. All right, let's just kind of go through. If you have more questions, we'll let this buffer up for a little bit. Sometimes as I'm doing this, it gets a little bit ahead of itself. So if you wanted to, you could just kind of, we'll just kind of let it catch up just a little bit. So if people have some more questions, I'll kind of go through, make sure. All right, so sometimes we run into delays or it's a little bit ahead. So if you have some questions. All right, so we'll see if more questions coming in or if there's any points you wanted to go over again. All right, so we'll just wait a minute for video to kind of catch up. All right, so I see just a quick video on doing like synchronizing some background vocals, and we could actually kind of do this in sometimes a similar way to how we do kind of drum quantizing. So if you actually just kind of come to your actual audio file here of background vocals, and we can now just kind of, if you go to your hit points, we could actually just adjust the hit points here, and we'll kind of set your threshold. And we could just kind of find the hit points. And now one of the cool things is Cubase will actually automatically detect hit points for you in the background as you record files. So if I want to just kind of come here, we could adjust a threshold to get rid of some noise bleeding through. And you can manually add hit points as you see fit. So say we like our hit points here. We could actually now place these into a group and enable group editing. Then as you would come here, you could actually choose to, you could now slice the audio if you wanted to. So you could kind of choose your custom panel settings. So we'll just take this group here. And now once you have that, you could actually just hit Q and you could quantize your audio directly from there. So as you wanted to, you could just choose to quantize based on the actual hit point definition. One other thing that's handy, I know the comment said you didn't want to do it necessarily in the actual window, but if you go into the sample editor and go to the audio warp settings, you can now actually just go to free warp. And if you wanted to, this is really handy for kind of lining up different stuff. So you could actually just say, I want this to change the audio, so you could change timing. You can see the bars and beats here, but you don't see it with the other tracks. So that way you could extend your different data and just have it so that timing could be regulated. But just you could also quantize based on hit points for all the selected parts there as well. All right, so let's take a look, see if there's any more topics. I'll go through my list of topics we had sent in advance. All right, if you guys have topics, we'll wait a couple minutes to see if you have any other questions that you want to have covered. Just make sure. Yeah, and to web video, I'm just reading your comments about the side chaining. I could play around with it a little bit more and see if I come up with a similar way, but I think that's kind of how the side chaining is implemented. But I'll play around with it and see if there's some other workarounds. So you could email the channel right after if you want. All right, we'll see if there's more questions, any topics or stuff you guys want covered again. I'm just going to scroll through. All right, we'll hang out for those people who are just who are watching it afterwards. We can we're just kind of letting some buffers catch up, see if people have additional questions. All right, I'm scrolling down to the bottom, see if there's any more questions here. We'll hang out a couple more minutes, see if people have questions. Did everyone learn a couple tricks, new tricks? Make sure you guys will see. Sometimes the comments are delayed, so we'll hang out. All right, so I saw some more questions kind of come in. Okay. Okay, so I see some questions from Aram. Okay, so when moving a MIDI note, there was you mentioned that there was kind of the crosshairs, I believe. I think that might be one of the preferences. We'll just check. Let's see if I can find, I think it might be preference. Let me just see if I can find a crosshairs preference. Okay, so I think if you come right here, you could do the crosshair cursors. So let me see. So you can kind of see the crosshairs there. It's a little more subtle. I think that's what you're asking, Aram. So try going to Preferences, to Editing Tools, and make sure that you have the crosshair cursor enabled there. Okay, we got a question from Sir Robert. Good to see you online here. Question about remixing an MP3 and copying the beat and just reworking music. Let's see. Let's say if I have a, we'll do a new project here. I'm just going to import, I don't really have an MP3 file or one that's copyright free to kind of pull up, but let me just pull up a quick drum loop. I think maybe we'll get an idea, some tricks you could do. So I'm just going to find some different drum loops here. And let's okay, so let's say we've now imported this into our project window, and it will import it directly into. Now, one of the things that could be really helpful if you have a song is to just come here to a particular song. Especially if you're doing remixes, is to actually find what the original tempo of the file was. So I'll just open up, I'm going to import another file. I'll just do a quick 2-track mix. Let me see if I have. All right, so let's say if I have a song here. One of the things that can really make your life a lot easier is to actually know what the tempo is of the original file. Sometimes people won't be so good at actually giving you the tempo. So if you come here, you could actually just go to your project menu and do tempo detection. So if I come here, I could analyze this particular track. And what this is going to do is just figure out the actual tempo of the particular files. So we look at this, we can see that there's going to be some tempo changes. Now, if you're working with other loops or MIDI programs, now that as you've done this, it'll actually find it and start it as a 1/4 bar, because we don't naturally assume that everything's in 4/4. So let's say right at this point is where the downbeat is. So I'm going to just come right here. We'll say we're done with that. And we'll put it in our 4/4 bar. So that's the downbeat. And now at this point, I could line everything up musically based on the actual tempo of the file. So now at this point, if I wanted a particular drum loop to automatically follow that tempo, all I had to do is make sure that I just have this into musical mode. And then once I take it off musical mode, it's going to be the same exact time as the original file. But once I put it in musical mode, it will now just synchronize directly with that file. So as I duplicate this loop over and over and over again, that would automatically be kind of like a tempo parasite and speed up and slow down based on the original tempo of the drum loops there. So that way, as you copy it, you've defined the grid by working and extracting the original tempo from the track. So, and then everything else, you could just place it into musical mode, and it will now follow all the tempo changes of the original file for you. So that comes in very handy for doing quick remixes. Now, if you have a particular drum beat here, let's say you're playing this and you want to do some interesting kind of like DJ and stutter and drop effects. So let's say if I have this, and I will now just take it off musical mode, and we'll go back to, say, our original file. One of the things that could be really interesting is just as opening up an insert effect using the loop mash FX. So what this is going to allow you to do is to take your audio here and just do, and you could choose to have different drop effects or different stutter effects. So even if you have kind of a large remix, something like this, we'll show you. You could kind of take an entire file here and you could run this on entire tracks or just particular tracks as you're playing. We're going to do stutters. We're going to capture a hook. You have different pulses here. So once you kind of have the beat, then once you've figured out the grid or the tempo of the original file, you could do all sorts of creative stuff because you have that correlation between the beat, the music, and the grid. So now you could do stuff that's tempo synced, and it's not just kind of guessing what the tempo is, and everything could be very, very tight. So that's a great way to kind of start off with kind of doing a remix from your MP3, Robert. See, so with some more questions coming in. Okay, so we had a question on, as you kind of work with the slices for the audio, is there a way to adjust that? So if you wanted to navigate around the slices of the audio, so if I come here, let's say if I just double click, we could see kind of the slices here. And if I wanted to navigate to the next significant rhythmic point, you could just hit Alt-N on the selected track. So just select the track here. That'll take you to the next track, or Alt-B will take you back to the previous marker. But if you find that that's not or that maybe the settings are too sensitive, all you have to do is double click, go into the sample editor, and you could adjust your threshold here. So if you want it less, you can now just navigate here and hit Alt-N. Or if you want it to be a little more sensitive to what it picks up, you could just kind of come right here and adjust that sensitivity right there with the threshold slider. So double click on the sample editor, go into the hit points, and then adjust your threshold accordingly. And that will allow you to adjust the kind of the threshold for the navigation of all the hit points as well. All right, so we had a very audio question. Some of the behaviors changed in Cubase 7, so let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. We'll show you the trick to this. So if I wanted to go into my very audio editor, I'll just go to a different project real quick. And this is one of the little preferences that changed in 7 to kind of make everyone pay attention. So if we come here, and it used to be that the very audio in Cubase 5 and Cubase 6 would have to would automatically snap to the next pitch by default. So if I double click here and we go to the very audio tab, and we'll just enable the very audio here. If it was a little bit flat or out of tune, let's say if it was like this, when you move in previous versions, when you moved it, it would snap to the next diatonic note here. If you wanted to move it in between notes, you could hold down the Shift key, and that would allow you to do fine control. Now the default setting is it'll jump up perfectly up a perfect semitone every time you do that, and if the note is out of tune, it may not make much sense. The trick is to go to your file menu and go to preferences, or your preferences on your Cubase menu on the Mac, and then when you go to tool modifiers, you'll see right here when you go into, I think it's going to be under edit pitch and warp tool. So when you see absolute pitch shifting, I believe it's set to control. Just set that modifier there to none. So once again, go to preferences, to editing, tool modifiers, and then edit pitch warp tool, and to absolute pitch snapping, set the modifier key to none. And then that will allow you to automatically snap directly to the diatonics, to the next semitone without it snapping an exact equal amount out of tune to the next note. So I'm not sure why it was changed, but it's a really handy thing to do to make kind of your editing much faster. So once again, editing, tool modifiers, edit pitch / warp tool, absolute pitch snapping set to none. All right, we'll see if there's more questions that have come in. All right, if you guys have more questions, we have about 5 more minutes. We'll wrap up, but if you have more questions, please feel free to kind of shoot them over. All right, so we'll let kind of catch up here. Okay, so your comments, Sir Robert. All right. All right, so when saving a track preset, is there a way to save the full chain? So the track presets will, will carry everything except for like the send effects information, because that's going to be kind of different per project. So if you come here, you could have all of your EQ settings, your channel strip settings, as well as your inserts. So let's say if I come here and I have my channel strip set up, and we'll go ahead and adjust some of the parameters. I believe this is all carried through. So let me go ahead and we'll just test this. I'm going to right click on it here. We'll save it as a track preset. So we'll call it Google Hangout May. And let's say I want to add a new track using track preset. And we'll just go to Google Hangout May. And we'll open this up. And everything was saved just there. So it's going to use the inserts, the channel strip, and the EQs, and your volume and panning. Will all be carried over, but the sends aren't, because those probably make more sense to be applicable directly inside of a particular project as opposed to a global thing. All right, we'll see if there's more questions that are coming in. Be wrapping up in a couple minutes. I'd like to thank all you guys for coming out. Hope everyone's learned some things. All right, so those of us that are kind of watching afterwards. We're just kind of waiting for the buffer to catch up. See if there's more questions that are coming in. All right, we'll see if there's any last minute quick questions before we wrap up. All right, we'll wait one more minute for questions, and then we'll go ahead and sign off. All right, so see if any more questions you guys have. All right, we'll wait one more minute and see if we wrap up. All right, so I guess we'll wrap up our May Google Hangout Club Cubase. Thanks everyone for participating. If you have questions, please feel free to let me know. If you want to, we'll be announcing the June meeting. I think I might be out of the country for the first Tuesday in June, so we might do it the second Tuesday, but we'll announce it late in May for everyone who wants to check out the next one. And if you want to send in your topics in advance, it's always helpful so we can get through them. I'd like to thank everyone for participating, and have a great time with your Cubase software. And if you have any questions, we'll see you on the next Google Hangout. Take care. Thank you.